Have you ever wondered how one man could be both a naval strategic genius and the initiator of one of the greatest defeats in military history? Welcome to the dramatic and paradoxical story of Yamamoto Isoroku, the architect of Pearl Harbor who turned the world upside down, only to have the situation turned upside down in an impossible way. More pathetic. Born into a samurai family, Yamamoto was known as the master of modern warfare. But wait, before praising him as a brilliant strategist, let's look at the big picture. This is the person who dared to plan an attack on America, a country with such a strong industry that it can turn Coca-Cola cans. Cola became an aircraft carrier, then ended his career with a plane crash, whose opponents even knew the coordinates. Yamamoto is not just a historical figure, he is a symbol of contradiction, an ambitious strategist, but also someone who knows full well that Japan is unlikely to win this war. So what did he achieve? And is his greatness something to be admired, or just a valuable lesson in the history of war? Let's explore this story that is both tragic and incredibly ironic in today's video. Welcome to Faces of History. Here we uncover fascinating stories from the past and dive into the lives of legendary figures who shaped the course of world history. If you're passionate about history and the incredible journeys of those who made it, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest videos. Let's embark on this inspiring journey through time together. Biography and background. Yamamoto Isoroku, whose name has gone down in history as one of Japan's most famous naval strategists. But before he became a master of modern warfare, he was just a boy born in the small village of Nagaoka on April 4th, 1884. And you know what's interesting? He actually came from a samurai family. That's right, a samurai family. The type of children of the family that we often think will be taught with wooden swords and the spirit of samurai from a young age. But life is not like the movies. Yamamoto grew up in a period when Japan was beginning to say goodbye to the samurai era and moving to a period of Western-style modernization. His real name is Takano Isoroku, but he was later adopted into the Yamamoto family, a type of transfer of custody rights that was quite common at that time. The name Isoroku means 56, based on his father's age when Yamamoto was born. Yes, exactly. Yamamoto's father contributed rice to the family quite late, and his name is nothing more than a reminder that his father belongs to the U-60 category, but is still in good shape. However, Yamamoto is more than just a name. He showed outstanding talent from an early age, especially in education. After graduating from the Japanese Naval Academy, Yamamoto not only ranked first in his class, but also impressed with his sharp thinking, to the point of being sent to study abroad in the US. Something very rare in the Japanese context at that time. And this was the first big turning point in his life. While studying at Harvard, Yamamoto not only learned about navigation, but also tasted Western culture. He quickly realized that America not only had powerful guns and warships, but also a massive industry. Here he often saw Americans drinking coffee instead of tea, eating bread instead of rice, and mass-producing machines instead of by hand. It seems that from this moment on, he began to think, if I have to confront them, it will be a difficult problem. However, Yamamoto still maintained faith in Japan's modernization. After returning to his homeland, he continued to advance in the military at an astonishing rate. But the most interesting thing is that Yamamoto is not a traditional officer. Instead of always talking about honor and martyrdom, he was famous for his foresight and practical attitude. He once declared that Japan attacking the United States would be like awakening a sleeping giant. But ironically, it was he who planned Pearl Harbor. In short, Yamamoto Isoroku is a man of contradictions, a modern-day samurai, a Japanese deeply influenced by the West, and a strategist who understands the strength of his enemies, but is still determined to challenge destiny. His life, starting from a small village in Japan, has become a symbol of the dramatic ups and downs in the history of World War. Role in the Japanese Navy. If you think Yamamoto Isoroku is simply an officer sitting at a desk, signing a few orders and drinking green tea, then wrong. Yamamoto was more than just a member of the Japanese Navy. He was the strategic soul of this force during the peak years of World War II. But to understand his special role, we need to go back in time and look at how he climbed the power ladder, from young officer to brilliant strategist. Yamamoto began his career as a promising young officer. Don't let his gentle appearance fool you. Yamamoto has a sharp mind and an extraordinary ability to learn. After graduating with honors from the Japanese Naval Academy, he quickly attracted attention for his profound understanding of modern naval strategy, especially what he learned from his time in America. Yamamoto believed that the future of warfare lay not in giant old-fashioned warships, but in airplanes and aircraft carriers. It sounds obvious today, but back then, this idea was like telling you that instead of using a car, invest in a flying car. And of course, not everyone agrees with him. Rebels in the ranks. To be honest, Yamamoto is not the type to follow the majority. In a traditional military environment, where people often nod in agreement with their leaders to preserve their careers, he is famous for daring to speak frankly. This made him many internal political enemies, especially those who supported Japan's expansion of the war with the United States. Yamamoto, on the other hand, always warns that confronting the US is like challenging a giant weapons factory. Not a good idea if you are a country with a shortage of resources. But paradoxically, he became the one who had to carry out the plan to attack Pearl Harbor. A historic but also risky decision. It's true that life is not like a dream. The man who changed the face of naval warfare. When he became Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet in 1939, Yamamoto truly took command of the stage. He strongly promoted the modernization of the Japanese Navy, focusing on the development of aircraft carriers and air combat tactics. This idea was not only new but also bold, and it must be acknowledged that it helped Japan achieve some of its early victories in World War II. The Battle of Pearl Harbor is a prime example. Despite much controversy, it cannot be denied that Yamamoto planned with astonishing precision. The only problem? He knew clearly that, if he could not end the war quickly, Japan would not be able to sustain long against America's industrial might. This is why he often emphasizes, "I can do it for 6 months to a year, but after that, I'm not sure." A warning, but who would listen? A pragmatic strategist, but forced by politics? Yamamoto's role is not limited to strategic planning. He is also someone who must constantly balance the reality of war and political pressure from senior Japanese leaders. He was often caught between two streams of thought: the hawks who wanted to push for expansion and the harsh reality of Japan's limited resources. It is no exaggeration to say that he was the one who steered the Japanese Navy ship between two lines of fire, one from the enemy, the other from within. Heritage in the Navy. Under Yamamoto's leadership, the Japanese Navy achieved remarkable achievements, especially in the early stages of the war. However, the defeat at Midway, a campaign he indirectly directed, became a major turning point, marking the decline of the Japanese Navy. Although his role was full of contradictions, it cannot be denied that Yamamoto left a deep mark in the history of modern warfare. He was not only a talented strategist, but also a man who understood his own and his country's limits. But ironically, he could not prevent the thing he always feared most: inevitable failure, against an enemy superior in every way. In short, if you are looking for a historical figure who is both resilient, realistic, and full of paradoxes, Yamamoto Isoroku is definitely an option not to be missed. Architect of Pearl Harbor. If you've ever heard of Pearl Harbor, you've probably heard the name Yamamoto Isoroku. He was the person behind the bold plan that woke America up on the morning of December 7, 1941, a shock that not only shook America, but also changed the outcome of World War II. But wait, do you think this plan is a complete landslide? Let's dissect the story behind this historic campaign. Where did the crazy idea come from? In the early 1940s, Japan was in a difficult situation. The economy was exhausted, resources were embargoed by the United States, and there was pressure to expand its territory to maintain the war. In this context, Japanese military leaders decided that a war with the United States was inevitable. But who is brave enough to plan to slap in the face a giant power like America? That's right, Yamamoto Isoroku. Although famous for his caution and practicality, Yamamoto clearly understood that Japan only had a chance of winning if they gained an advantage from the start. And the only way to do it? Strike a sudden blow, a fatal punch to the heart of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific, Pearl Harbor base in Hawaii. Yamamoto's plan, a risky gamble. Yamamoto's idea was not only bold but also dangerous. He knew clearly that Japan could not maintain a long-term war with the United States, so his main goal was to weaken the U.S. Navy from the beginning, thereby forcing them to sit at the negotiating table. But this plan is not simple. Surprise attack. Use the aircraft carrier fleet to deploy surprise attack aircraft early in the morning when American soldiers are still sleeping soundly. Focus on large warships. Yamamoto especially emphasized the destruction of U.S. aircraft carriers and battleships, the trump cards in warfare at sea. Quick, compact, and retreat. The campaign must be carried out quickly and retreat before the U.S. Army can counterattack. It sounds simple, but in reality, this is a risky gamble. Yamamoto knew full well that if he failed, the consequences would be extremely dire. Fateful day, December 7, 1941. Yamamoto's plan was executed almost perfectly. On the morning of December 7th, more than 350 Japanese aircraft suddenly attacked Pearl Harbor, destroying a series of warships, aircraft, and military infrastructure. In less than 2 hours, the U.S. Navy suffered heavy losses, with more than 2,400 people killed and many warships sunk, including the battleship USS Arizona. From a tactical perspective, this was a resounding success, a blow that few expected. But wait, if this is such a big victory, why is Yamamoto worried? That's because strong punch, but not enough to knock out. Although the Pearl Harbor campaign achieved its initial goal of crippling the U.S. Navy, it still had fatal mistakes. Aircraft carrier escape. The important U.S. aircraft carriers, Yamamoto's main target, were not present at Pearl Harbor at the time of the attack. This leaves the U.S. still strong enough to respond in the future. Angry the giant, instead of making America demoralized, Pearl Harbor made this country more united than ever. Imagine you woke up a sleeping giant. Not only did you not scare him, you made him so angry that he wanted to crush you. Yes, that is the consequence of this campaign. Failure to achieve the main goal. Yamamoto hoped this campaign would force the U.S. to sign peace with Japan, but the opposite happened. The U.S. declared war on Japan and pledged to fight to the end. After Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto showed no complacency. On the contrary, he knew that this was only the beginning of a war that Japan would be unlikely to win. He once said, "I can run wild for 6 months to a year, but after that, I'm not sure." And he was right. Just 6 months later, Japan suffered a disastrous defeat at the Battle of Midway, marking the irreversible decline of the Japanese Navy. Although successful in creating initial shock, Pearl Harbor was also the turning point that put Japan at a disadvantage in World War II. For Yamamoto, this campaign represents the biggest contradiction of his career. A genius plan, but a bet on a gamble where victory is not in hand. The Battle of Pearl Harbor is not only a testament to Yamamoto's strategic talent, but also a reminder that, in war, sometimes the greatest victories bring the most painful consequences. Other major campaigns. Yamamoto Isoroku is not only remembered for the Battle of Pearl Harbor, but also left a deep impression through a series of other campaigns. However, if Pearl Harbor is considered an impressive opening song, then many subsequent campaigns were undeniably low notes. Let's take a look at the major campaigns to see how Yamamoto continues to prove himself as a genius strategist, or gets stuck in risky gambles. Battle of Midway. An all-out gamble, and the price was too high. If Pearl Harbor was a sudden blow that stunned the United States, then the Battle of Midway was like Yamamoto deciding to throw all his assets into a card game in the hope of turning the tide. Taking place in June 1942, this was an ambitious campaign to gain control of Midway Island, an important strategic location in the Pacific Ocean. Yamamoto's plan is quite complicated but no less daring. Lure the U.S. Navy out of the base with a diversionary attack, then defeat the entire enemy fleet in an all-out battle. Surprise attack and capture Midway Island, turning this place into an outpost for further campaigns. Sounds great, but the problem is, the Americans have caught their cards. Thanks to decoding the Japanese code, they knew Yamamoto's exact plan. Result? Instead of a resounding victory, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers and thousands of soldiers, while the US only lost a single aircraft carrier. Midway was not only a strategic failure, but also a turning point from which the Japanese Navy never fully recovered. Midway can be roughly translated as halfway, and indeed this is when Japan was stopped halfway in its ambition to dominate the Pacific Ocean. Battle of Guadalcanal, a painful war of attrition. After Midway, Yamamoto moved on to support the Guadalcanal campaign, a grueling war that lasted from August 1942 to February 1943. Japan's goal was to maintain control of the island of Guadalcanal, where the airfield was located. Henderson is important. Initially, the Japanese gained some advantages, but the war quickly turned into a quagmire of resource attrition. Yamamoto tried to reinforce and support the Japanese Navy, but his efforts were often hindered by America. With superiority in resources and technology, the Americans continuously attacked, exhausting Japan. Consequence: Japan not only lost Guadalcanal, but also lost its fighting spirit. This was another failure in a series of campaigns that Yamamoto faced. Guadalcanal sounds like the name of a delicious dish, but to the Japanese Navy, this is a bitter dish that they have to swallow for 6 months. Operation Solomon, when advantages become burdens. The Solomon campaign, consisting of a series of battles around the Solomon Islands, was part of Yamamoto's attempt to regain the initiative after previous defeats. However, this is also a testament to the fact that genius strategy cannot overcome the opponent's industrial and technological power. During these battles, Yamamoto continued to emphasize the importance of air combat and aircraft carriers. But the problem is that Japan cannot produce enough ships, planes, or train pilots in time to replace continuous losses. Meanwhile, America seems to produce aircraft carriers using an automobile assembly line. Japan fights with limited resources, while the US only needs a few hours of overtime to have a brand new aircraft carrier. Truly unfair play. The plan never came to fruition. In addition to the campaigns he has carried out, Yamamoto also cherishes many other ambitious plans to turn the tide of battle. However, before many plans could be implemented, he suffered the biggest failure: his own death. In a carefully orchestrated assassination campaign by the United States called Operation Vengeance, the plane carrying Yamamoto was shot down in April 1943. His death was not only a personal loss, but also marked a spiritual weakening. God of the Japanese Navy. Yamamoto was the one who stunned America, but in the end it was America who ended his role in the war drama. Yamamoto's campaigns, while bold and innovative, were limited by practical factors: America's superior industrial might, over-reliance on early victories, and financial distress. Original Japanese. He is a strategist whose talent no one can deny, but at the same time he is also a character stuck between great ambition and unfavorable conditions. If there's a lesson to be learned from these campaigns, it's this: no matter how smart you are, sometimes you can't beat an opponent with greater resources and a tireless production line. Death and influence. Yamamoto Isoroku, one of Japan's most brilliant strategic minds, met a tragic and no less thrilling end when his death became one of the most famous assassination campaigns. History of war. But the interesting thing is, he did not die because of strategic mistakes or defeat on the battlefield. Instead, he died because his opponent played too smart. Let's learn about this dramatic story. Operation Vengeance, U.S. hunts for Yamamoto. In April 1943, Yamamoto decided to make an inspection tour of Japanese military bases in the Solomon Islands. This is not a vacation. He wanted to encourage the soldiers after Japan's series of painful defeats, especially at Guadalcanal. But Yamamoto did not know that the Americans saw through his entire schedule. Thanks to decoding the Japanese Navy's code, the Americans knew the exact date, time, and itinerary of the plane carrying Yamamoto. President Roosevelt, upon hearing this news, ordered a special operation. Capture Yamamoto or kill him. The name of the campaign is Operation Vengeance. It already sounds like Hollywood drama. Death in the air. On the morning of April 18, 1943, Yamamoto boarded the Mitsubishi G4M Betty plane with his entourage. This plane was escorted by a team of Zero fighters, Japan's top fighter jets at that time. But what they did not expect was that, in the airspace of Bougainville, a group of 16 American P-38 Lightning fighters were waiting. With a carefully calculated strategy, the P-38 group divided into teams to destroy the escort force and pursue the plane carrying Yamamoto. Result? Yamamoto's plane was shot down and crashed into the jungle, ending the life of one of Japan's greatest military leaders. If you think you're having an unlucky day, remember that Yamamoto was shot down in a plan meticulously orchestrated by his opponents, down to the minute, even when he was just trying to go on a business trip. Normal. Yamamoto's death was not only a personal loss, but also a great shock to the entire Japanese Navy. He is a symbol of wisdom, experience, and leadership in the military. When Yamamoto died, Japan lost not only a strategist, but also the spirit of its soldiers, those who looked to him as a guiding light amid dark days. Some direct effects. Low morale. Yamamoto was one of the few Japanese leaders able to maintain the confidence of his soldiers in difficult times. After his death, fighting spirit in the Japanese Navy decreased significantly. Loss of wise leadership. No one in the Japanese Navy could replace Yamamoto strategically. His successors, although talented, were not capable of confronting America's growing power. Symbol of defeat. Yamamoto's death was seen as a clear sign that the balance of power had tilted heavily in favor of the United States. It also revealed a painful truth. Japan not only lost in technology and production, but also lost in intelligence capabilities. Yamamoto Isoroku, who is hailed as one of the most brilliant strategists in history, is also a symbol of contradiction. He is a genius with a vision that surpasses his time, but is stuck in a chaotic period where his bold ideas cannot overcome the limits of reality. He understood better than anyone that Japan could not win a long war with the United States, but ironically, he was the one who laid the foundation for that war. Yamamoto's life and career leave a valuable lesson. Even the smartest and most talented people cannot avoid making mistakes if they are bound by circumstances and decisions beyond their control. He is not only a strategist, but also a tragic figure, representing the struggle between personal ambition and harsh reality. If Yamamoto lived in modern times, he would probably be a military analyst on YouTube, constantly warning the world about strategic mistakes, and maybe he wouldn't have to wake up the sleeping giant. Whether you view Yamamoto as a hero, a strategic genius, or a controversial figure, there's no denying that his legacy has changed the way we view modern warfare. He was the initiator of a new era of warfare, where air combat and industrial power played a decisive role. But at the same time, he is also a stark reminder that war is never a profitable game, even for the best players. If you find the story of Yamamoto Isoroku fascinating, please leave your opinion in the comments. Was he a genius buried by circumstances, or a person who made unforgivable mistakes? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next interesting historical stories. In particular, turn on the notification bell. Don't be like Yamamoto, who knows the risks but doesn't turn on the radar to avoid disaster.